time is for the movie Shelter. And this is directed by Rick Roman Woe. And it stars Jason Statham, Naomi Ackie, and Daniel Mays, to go along with a few others. On a coastal island, a former assassin living in self imposed exile reserves a young girl from a deadly storm. As their lives start to intertwine, as their lives start to intertwine, he must protect the orphan while battling enemies from his past. So we pretty much getting the gist of Jason Statham once again on his action packed adventure. So this time he's playing this like rogue assassin called Mason, and he's pretty much on living in exile on a coastal island where he ends up seeing this one young orphan girl with her uncle, and they're on a boat trip. And so what happens is they get caught up in a deadly storm, and he ends up right in the midst of the action, and she ends up the young orphan girl ends up on the sea on the docks, and she ends up almost drowning. So he ends up going on his life shore on a shore boat to go save her. And while he ends up saving her in the process, her she ends up finding out later as she wakes up that her uncle ends up not being there. And so throughout the whole runtime, he ends up knowing about throughout that whole time as he omits to her about what happened to her family, and they both live in like two different parallel sides of lives. He ends up having to battle a lot of enemies as he's protecting this young orphan girl, battling the battle foes and enemies from his past. One because of one of his bosses, and then of course a former task force agency that he used to work for. And then they end up sending out a DEA agency, a whole like a DEA team, an agency, and also the whole like military encompassing trying to go after Mason because he ended up violating their own protocol, and so he ends up on that mission while being on this coastal island. Yeah, he ends up going once he goes back into the city. That's where things started to hit the fan. Now, yeah, this was in the theaters back in January. This is the January release, so but I'm a little bit more behind covering it. Um, didn't even think about seeing it, Terrence. So yeah, I wasn't even planning on doing you know this sort of thing because Jason Statham has had films where I like him in a lot, and then there's films that are stereotypical of what he's done before in the past. So it's kind of like why I was like mixed feelings. But this one, it was actually really solid. This actually reminds me a lot of what he did with Homefront and the first two Transporter films. I was gonna let you guys know that this reminds me a lot of what he did with the earlier like Transformer films and what he did in Homefront. But like I said, the story is not really anything new. The subplot's not anything new from any typical Jason Statham film. He's like rescuing people, and he's like, you know, saving people from like risking of their life, like they might be drowning, or like somebody like might be on the run, or like they having him killed. Yeah, he's done similar things like this before. He's even had to save his own family, like going back to even Hobbs and Shaw with him in The Rock. He was protecting his own sister in that film. So it's not the story, like I said, is not anything new like I haven't seen before from any other typical film. But I feel like the action, I feel like the pacing was there, and protected was really there, and it really sits well. And I feel like his performance as Mason, what he did in this film, he does a lot of things where you definitely, even though he's done a lot of damage, he's done a lot of wrongdoings, a lot of good, and that's why the task force is pretty much after him. But you feel like he cares not only for that young orphan girl, but he also cares for himself, like he does in other films. So that's the main thing that I like about this one. It's like you can tell the care and the withal was in here, and you can tell the action and the pacing. Yeah, the beginning, like the first 25-30 minutes, kind of felt a little bit slow, and the tooth and the nail kind of felt a little bit dry and run down. Sometimes typical January movies feel like they slow or they're dry and they're a little bit run down, but But this felt like he was like like he really cared, not just about himself but then his young girl, but really cared about keeping them both safe and out of harm's way. And so yeah, that's the one thing that I like about this film is like the action and the pacing. After the first half, it picks straight right back up. It's like it's rhythm, like it has something flow, it has some natural. I thought the action, I thought the gunshots, I thought everything about it, the explosions, because there was a few big explosions in here. It was pretty good. It was pretty good, and it was pretty entertaining, high octane. It was a lot of stakes in here, a lot of stakes involved, man. And you really feel for Mason, you really feel for him, and you really feel for the girl because her life pretty much parallel that she doesn't really have a whole lot of family around her. He has to feel like he's the one that's gonna safeguard and protect her. Uh, so yeah, I would definitely keep this one on your radar. For me, like I said, the main thing is, of course, the main big positive is, like I said, Jason Statham. The main thing I will say is the action is definitely on point. You're definitely gonna be it's gonna be a lot of gunshots. Gonna be a lot of gunfire in this film. Be prepared for that. A lot of DEA, a lot of Task Force HD in here. You're definitely gonna enjoy that. And also, like I said, the pacing was really solid. The only thing, like I said, is I do think the storytelling, and I do think the subplots, and I do think it's formulaic, a typical Statham movies, is very familiar. Like you're gonna recognize, like, oh yeah, and it gets predictable at certain spots. Like yeah, I kind of seen this coming, and you'll know what I'm talking about when you see it. It's gonna be there. But other than that, I give this film a solid. I give this a solid three stars out of four. Definitely, I definitely had a really good time watching it. Watching this with my mom, and she really liked it as well. So yeah, give this one a watch, man. You're definitely gonna be surprised. I would think I would prefer The Beekeeper over this, and I would think I would prefer Wrath of Man over this a little bit too, because like I said, those films did not feel like familiar, typical territory. I felt like this one kind of felt like that just a little bit from the story. But yeah, check this one out. Give this one a shot. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Sheltered. Let me know what you think about it when you do get a chance to see it. And yeah, appreciate y'all for tuning in and commenting and responding. I'm out. Peace.